breath is constant, why do we still forget the one who gives it? Every human takes roughly 20,000 breaths a day, an unbroken rhythm that sustains life itself. Yet for most people, not a single one is noticed. Breathing continues. But awareness does not. The 13th century mystic Yunus Emre proposed a remarkable idea that the most ordinary human act, the breath, is the most direct path to divine remembrance. What we overlook as mere physiology, he regarded as a hidden form of prayer. Here lies a paradox. Breath is continuous, but remembrance is not. We breathe without knowing, and therefore live without truly being present. For Emre, to awaken consciousness begins not with grand effort, but with the smallest possible act, noticing the breath and allowing it to remember God. In this lecture, we will explore how this ancient insight anticipates what modern science now understands, that the breath not only regulates the body, but shapes attention, emotion, and awareness itself. The modern human being lives in a state of chronic mental acceleration. Our attention is fragmented across devices, deadlines, and the constant stimulation of digital environments. Cognitive scientists describe this as continuous partial attention, a mode in which the brain is constantly alert, but rarely focused. Physiologically, this state has a cost. Under stress, the breath becomes shallow and irregular, activating the sympathetic nervous system, the body's fight-or-flight response. Prolonged activation narrows perception, raises cortisol levels, and reduces emotional regulation. In short, we breathe as though the world were a threat. Neuroscience confirms that chronic shallow breathing reinforces anxiety loops in the brain, particularly through overactivity in the amygdala and underregulation of the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for calm decision-making and attention control. In psychological terms, this is not merely poor breathing. It is a pattern of disconnection from body, from awareness, and from inner stillness. We could call it an amnesia of being. The more the mind races outward, the more it forgets the rhythm that sustains it. Yunus Emre, writing centuries before modern neuroscience, offered an antidote that begins with the breath but leads far beyond it. His method transforms an automatic biological function into a conscious act of remembrance, from respiration to invocation. Yunus Emre lived in 13th century Anatolia, a time of both social upheaval and deep spiritual renewal. He is remembered not as a theoretician, but as a poet of direct experience, one who translated complex Sufi metaphysics into the language of everyday life. For Emre, divine remembrance, or zikr, was not confined to ritual recitation. It was the transformation of consciousness itself, a way of living in constant awareness of the divine presence. In classical Sufi psychology, nafas, the breath was seen as the bridge between body and soul. It carried both physical oxygen and spiritual awareness. Emre's secret practice was simple yet radical, to transform unconscious breathing into conscious remembrance, each breath silently invoking the divine name. Philosophically, this means that sacredness is not confined to special moments. It depends entirely on the quality of awareness carried by each breath. From a modern lens, this ancient principle aligns closely with breath-centered mindfulness and the neuroscience of parasympathetic regulation, both of which demonstrate how attention to breath restores physiological and emotional balance. Yunus Emre's first insight is that awareness and breath are inseparable. To lose awareness is to lose connection with breath. To lose breath awareness is to lose awareness itself. Modern research supports this intuition. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for conscious attention, communicates directly with the respiratory centers in the brainstem. This means that the way we breathe influences how we think and feel, and conversely, the way we think influences how we breathe. When attention fragments, breathing becomes mechanical, a mirror of unconscious living. When attention returns, breath deepens and stabilizes. This two-way relationship forms what psychologists call neurophysiological feedback, a continuous loop between mind and body. In Sufi terms, this feedback is the rhythm of remembrance. When breath becomes conscious, zikr begins, not as repetition of words, but as the restoration of awareness itself. Emre expressed it succinctly: the one who breathes with remembrance never forgets. This is not metaphor but method, the synchronization of neural, physiological, and spiritual rhythm. If consciousness rides the rhythm of breath, then perhaps forgetting God is not an act of disbelief, but a form of desynchronized awareness. Emre's second insight concerns vibration. In Sufi cosmology, creation begins with a command, kun fayakun be, and it is. The universe arises through vibration, through the divine word manifesting as existence itself. Breath, even when silent, produces microvibrations in the vocal tract. Physiologically, every inhale and exhale generates subtle sound frequencies that resonate through the body. For Emre, this vibration is sacred. Each breath carries the unspoken syllable, a sound regarded in Sufism as the purest expression of divine being. To breathe, therefore, is to articulate the name of God continuously, whether one is aware of it or not. From a neuroscientific perspective, this practice integrates Broca's area, the region of the brain involved in speech, with the autonomic nervous system, creating a unity between language, emotion, and physiology. Modern research on mantra repetition shows similar effects. Subvocalized sound stabilizes neural oscillations, quiets the default mode network, and increases overall coherence in brain activity. Thus, Emre's breath remembrance converts biology into theology. Every inhale affirms existence. Every exhale releases separation. Breath does not need to speak to remember. It vibrates remembrance. If every breath already carries divine rhythm, perhaps the real question is, what prevents us from hearing it? Emre's third insight is deeply psychological. Forgetfulness, he says, is not ignorance, it is habit. Cognitive science calls this automaticity bias, when repeated behaviors become so familiar that awareness fades. Breathing exemplifies this perfectly. Its constant repetition renders it invisible to consciousness. In the same way, spiritual practices can lose vitality when repetition outpaces awareness. Words of prayer or recitation may continue, but their meaning becomes hollow. Emre's warning is precise. Remembrance must remain conscious. The same act, breathing, speaking, or praying, becomes sacred only when performed with awareness. Mindfulness research identifies a similar phenomenon known as attentional renewal, the deliberate refreshment of attention to prevent mental habituation. Without renewal, even meditation becomes mechanical. Therefore, Emre's practice of breath remembrance functions as a continual reset, a protection against spiritual automation. Each breath renews attention, restoring immediacy to the present moment. Remembrance, then, is not memory of something past. It is the reactivation of awareness now. Can remembering God be as simple and as difficult as remembering to notice? In Sufi metaphysics, all existence is one. a unity of being reflected in the human form. Yet ordinary consciousness experiences fragmentation. The body acts, the mind races, and the spirit feels distant. Breath is the bridge that reunites them. Neuroscientific studies demonstrate that slow, rhythmic breathing activates the vagus nerve, stimulating the parasympathetic system, the body's natural mechanism for calm and coherence. This synchronization extends to the heart and brain. Heart rate variability aligns with neural oscillations, producing what researchers call physiological coherence, a measurable state of inner harmony. Yunus Emre's teaching parallels this perfectly. When breath, thought, and awareness move in one rhythm, fragmentation collapses. The individual no longer experiences separate domains of being. Physical, mental, and spiritual merge into a single field of presence. In rational terms, to breathe with remembrance is to align the nervous system, the mind, and the heart in real time. In mystical terms, it is to embody divine unity within the human form. Perhaps spiritual unity is not a belief to be held, but a measurable state of integrated consciousness at a deeper stage. Emre describes a paradoxical transformation, remembrance that no longer requires effort. In the beginning, conscious breathing requires deliberate focus, much like any learned skill. But over time, repetition with awareness restructures neural pathways through plasticity. A behavior that was once deliberate becomes spontaneous, what psychologists call the shift from conscious competence to unconscious competence. For Emre, this is the maturity of zikr. The breath remembers even when the self forgets. Awareness no longer has to recall God. It has become remembrance itself. Philosophically, this marks the transition from doing to being. The ego no longer performs remembrance. Awareness breathes by its own nature. In cognitive language, this is the stabilization of the attentional system, awareness as baseline. Not as effort, the goal of remembrance, then, is not to remember, but to become remembrance itself. What would it mean for awareness to breathe itself? Emre's insights, though spiritual, find strong support in modern science. His practice translates into clear, measurable benefits across psychology and neuroscience. Conscious breathing for regulation. Studies show that slow diaphragmatic breathing enhances vagal tone, reduces anxiety, and improves executive control. Physiological harmony mirrors. The Sufi claim that remembrance through breath restores inner balance. Cognitive reorientation, breath awareness, interrupts the brain's default mode network, increasing meta-awareness. Paralleling Emre's aim to transform ordinary breathing into divine attention. Emotional integration, awareness of internal sensations, improves emotional stability and empathy. Breathing consciously reconnects the mind to the body's intelligence. Ethical function. When awareness stabilizes, impulsive reactions diminish. Behavior naturally becomes more mindful, compassionate, and coherent. In sum, what Yunus Emre intuited through spiritual insight, modern science now measures as coherence, the alignment of physiology, cognition, and awareness into a single, harmonious system. This exploration began with a paradox. We breathe constantly, yet forget the source of breath. Yunus Emre's secret. Practice reframes the act of breathing as more than a biological necessity. It is a method for aligning consciousness with being itself. Modern neuroscience confirms the mechanism. Breath regulates the nervous system. The nervous system shapes attention. Attention determines perception. And perception defines reality. Through this chain, breath becomes the first link in the reorganization of consciousness. Thus, remembrance is not external worship but internal synchronization, the alignment of mind, body, and soul in the rhythm of divine awareness. To breathe consciously is, as Emre implies, to think with the heart and to know with the whole being. When breath remembers God, consciousness remembers itself. If every breath is remembrance, then forgetting is impossible. Only awareness is missing.